In this video, we're going to look at and talk about Elasticsearch in the cloud, or software as a service instances of Elasticsearch. So we'll talk about what and why a SaaS Elasticsearch service would look like. We'll specifically talk more about AWS Elastic Cloud, as well as Elastic's own cloud offering. So what and why, or why would we look at Elasticsearch as a SaaS, or software as a service offering? So the biggest reason that you would look at any application as in a SaaS platform would be so you didn't have to maintain any infrastructure. In the case of Elasticsearch, versions can get upgraded behind the scenes automatically, and along with any other Elastic or any other SaaS offerings, you typically end up paying for what you use, not your fixed infrastructure costs. So imagine you're standing up that 8-node cluster we built at the end of the last video, where you had 3 master nodes and 5 data nodes. In a realistic expectation or a realistic world, a master node, it's a lower end machine, maybe it costs $1,000 each. So you're $3,000 in without even installing software for your first 3 master nodes. Then you've got 5 pretty beefy machines. Let's say they're $3,000 to $4,000. Let's go $4,000 each there to make the number bigger. You're at $20,000 right there for your data nodes. So $23,000 total upfront investment on actual physical hardware. Then you got to plug it in somewhere, maintain electricity and cooling. Then you got to install your software. And a week later you decide, oh no, my data nodes are too small, I need to upgrade them. Well, then you just bought 5 servers that you might not need. So that's the beauty of Elasticsearch in the cloud, or really any infrastructure that's in the cloud. So Elasticsearch is no different. So you got to look at your upfront costs. You got to look at the pay, how much it's going to cost you to run over time. And it is a big deal to not have to deal with upgrades, because that can sometimes be tricky in a production and operational system with Elasticsearch. So the first SaaS service for Elasticsearch that I wanted to point out was AWS's service. So AWS has a full host of Logstash, Elasticsearch, and Kibana in their regular AWS offerings. So it's fully integrated. Your servers will have IAM roles. You'll have typical security groups for firewalling, as well as access from other servers. So it's a nice, easily scalable offering they have. Push button scalability. Change your EC2 types underneath a bit, make them bigger, make them smaller, scale horizontally with the push of a button. It's AWS, so they do these services like RDS for the relational data services, or Elasticache. They make adding and scaling very, very easy. So if you think about AWS, they'll do automatic backups. It'll all go into S3, where you can get back to your data later in Elasticsearch format or JSON format. You could tie in some services or some functions using Lambda for scheduled tasks. There's just a big advantage for using a big, the big hosting provider of AWS for your Elasticsearch. So the thing to look for there, look at the costs. So the cost of their Elastic offering, I'm not sure how it compares, but it's definitely something you want to look at, again, depending on your needs and your data. The last time, a couple days ago, when I looked at their offering, their version was not up to date. It was a older version of Elasticsearch, but depending on how much of the new version you need, then it may work for you. And this video is all about Elasticsearch 6, or the Elk Stack version 6, where the last time I looked, AWS hadn't upgraded to 6 yet, and there were some huge increases in performance and disk utilization. So they may be out with 6 now. It's definitely something to look at. And the other one is Elastic's own offering. So like I wrote on here, who knows Elasticsearch better than Elastic? Their version of Elasticsearch is always kept up to date to the newest version of Elasticsearch. So you don't have to worry about any upgrades. It's fully automated in backups. You've got Kibana. You've got the whole 9 yards. The only thing you don't have with Kibana is the machine learning capabilities, but they are working on that for their cloud offering, as I learned recently. And they offer the full suite of security, all XPack, and again, it's easily push-button scalable. You can get your data in and out of this service very easily. So again, I recommend looking at their offerings, their pricing. The thing that I have found with software as a service like this for Elasticsearch or or any other kind of open source software or commercial software that you might use, it's typically a good cost ratio to hosting your Elasticsearch or something, instead of even just building EC2 instances and installing your own software at AWS and maintaining those. When your volumes, your search volumes and your data ingest volumes are small to medium size, when you start getting into a really large cluster, I have seen that the costs just simply outweigh the benefits of the SaaS offering in the long run. But really, it is like anything else with Elasticsearch, it's highly dependent on your application and your requirements for data. I want to wrap this whole thing up with kind of a ramble on what I've covered. So the way I think about this, I feel like, and I hope that you are now confident enough in your knowledge of the Elastic Stack where you can stand up a cluster. You can use Logstash or Beats appropriately, and you can pick the right tool for the right job to be able to get a very functional cluster going, get some visualizations and dashboards built, impress your boss, get a big raise, and send me a check out of the kindness of your heart. Just kidding on that one. But you should have enough knowledge to really be comfortable looking at their documentation, the applications themselves. Kibana has come such a long way that the interface really gives you a lot of information you need about your data and your cluster. But there's so much more to learn. I've been using Elasticsearch since version 1, if not pre-version 1, and heavily, regularly. I use it all the time. But it's still a lot of information that I don't know. A lot of that has to do with tuning and getting the cluster to behave or perform at the levels you need it to perform at. Getting data in is easy. Mapping data is pretty straightforward. Querying, when you build complicated queries, it can get tricky. There's just so much more in there that, frankly, I couldn't cover in a video without it being a 70-hour video. And I bet you're already tired of hearing my voice after 5-6 hours. So I highly recommend you get up an Elasticsearch cluster, you find a real-world problem to solve with it, you integrate it into your data, into your day-to-day life, and then just take time learning. Become the expert, become extremely functional with Elasticsearch. It's a great tool that you can use. It's one of those tools that's in my tool belt, and it's kind of the first thing I always reach to. There are a few of those. Redis is another one. It's just those two data stores or those two technologies are really applicable in so many different applications. So keep looking, keep reading, realize that you'll continually learn, and there's always something else to learn. So, and the other big lesson, we talked about it in the scaling videos here, is that scaling and designing your Elasticsearch cluster, there's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of hit and miss. There's a lot of math involved. If you want to do it, buy the Elasticsearch book. They have videos and podcast series and documentation on how to properly size your cluster. There's no magic answer. There's no spreadsheet. You put in a couple pieces of information and it pops out your exact answer. Learn how Elasticsearch scales. Learn how to ingest data. One of the things that can get you on cost specifically at AWS is how when you have replica shards being shipped all over the network, if you're crossing availability zones or you're crossing data centers, there's a data transfer cost, and that's really hard to calculate. So I highly recommend you start watching your AWS bills for stuff like that, or start in one cluster and one rack at AWS just to keep that cost down. But it's a great tool, and that's why I was really excited about doing this video. Is Elasticsearch has been one of my favorites for the past 6-7 years, so I'm glad I could go over it with you. Just to summarize this last video, we started out by looking at indexing shards and replica shards. That's the foundation of how Elasticsearch can scale, and scale really well. We looked at how easy it is to add general nodes to your cluster, just by setting a couple configuration items if you're in a restricted network environment like I am. Or it's even simpler if you don't have to predefine those IP lists. We talked about master nodes and how they really coordinate everything going on in your cluster and the importance of those. And always have 3 master nodes, so that way you don't have your split brain where you end up with 2 different clusters running thinking they're both right. We talked about the different node types for master nodes, data nodes, ingest nodes, and mixing and matching those to make some generalist nodes. And then finally, we wrapped up by talking about a couple of different SaaS offerings from AWS as well as from Elastic for Elasticsearch proper. So that is the end of this video series. If you're still with me, I'm glad. Hopefully you've learned a bunch that you can go back and impress your boss with and put on your performance review for the year and say, yeah, I watched this video and now I get to solve all of our problems with Elasticsearch, which frankly I've done a few times and it's always a good thing to do. So I hope you're empowered to take this back and start getting to work. Feel free to follow me at Twitter at Chris Fauerbach, or find me on LinkedIn, or go to my website, fauie.com, FAUIE.com, or even shoot me an email, chris@fauie.com. While I may not know the answer to your question, I may know the right person or the right resource to point you to. So I'd really love some feedback. So please feel free to leave a review, good, bad, ugly. It doesn't matter to me. I'm always happy to hear how I can improve. And if I've helped you, that'd be just awesome reassurance. So thanks.